In this video, we're going to look at the legislation around data security and things like confidentiality in the workplace. So there's two main pieces of legislation that we're going to need to look at, and these are the Data Protection Act from 1998 and also the Freedom of Information Act from the year 2000. Firstly, it's important to understand why confidentiality in the workplace would be important. So one of these things is to do with trust and respect. So it's important that we respect people's privacy. Also that we deal carefully with sensitive information. So this is again about minimizing any kind of potential for harm or embarrassment or distress that you might cause to somebody by revealing sensitive information. And it's about encouraging honesty and trust in terms of employers and employees being able to be honest with each other and also with the clients that you're dealing with. It's also important to think about these legal requirements that we've got in the workplace. So the Data Protection Act of 1998 gives us 8 principles that protect the privacy of individuals, and we're going to go through those a little bit later in this video. It also rules on what personal data can be collected and stored by organisations, and rules on who that information can be used by. Thinking about the Freedom of Information Act, it gives individuals the right to access information that is held by public bodies, and also these FOIA or Freedom of Information Act requests on decision-making processes, suppliers, things like this. So firstly, we're going to look at the Data Protection Act and these 8 data protection principles that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So these govern any information that's going to be collected by any group of people, any organisation. This information must be accurate, must be up to date, it must be kept safe and secure, so the organisation needs to take all of the possible actions it can to keep that information safe. It should be kept for no longer than is absolutely necessary, and in most cases that's only going to be a few years, so it's not going to be a huge long period of time. It should be used fairly and lawfully, so you don't want to get involved with fraud or illegal activity of different kinds. It should be used for limited and specifically stated purposes. So any time that you're collecting information from anyone who you're working with, you need to tell them what you're going to use that information to do. It should be used in a way that is adequate and relevant, so not excessive in any way, something that relates to the activity that you're actually involved in with the person whose information you're collecting. And it should be handled according to people's data protection rights. The last thing that this Act does is to protect your information from not being transferred outside of the UK without adequate protection, so that your information can't be shared internationally with lots of different bodies. Firstly, it's important also to think about what is personal data, and under this idea in the Data Protection Act. So basic personal data information includes things like names, addresses, telephone numbers, email addresses, also dates of birth or gender and sex, details of any known disability that might be disclosed to help you work with a person, their emergency contact details, so their next of kin or a relative or a friend that you need to contact in an emergency. Things like a person's national insurance number or their tax code or their bank details that you might need to collect to make a payment to them. Also, information like you might find on a CV. So things like education and qualification, work experience or employment history, and the terms and conditions of work in that place. So these are all things that you would find through an interview process and also would be detailed in a contract. Then you may also be recording details of any accidents or any training or disciplinary action that is connected with work. So all of these things are kind of basic personal data. Sensitive data that you might have access to are things like somebody's ethnic background, their political opinions, their religious beliefs, whether they're a member of a trade union or not, maybe details to do with their health, also their sexual health as a slightly different tangent to that, or any criminal record that they might have. So this sensitive data needs to be handled with even more care and even more attention than the basic personal data, because these are things that have the potential to cause a lot of distress to people if they're released widely. When we're thinking about other types of data that an organisation might collect or record, other types of confidential information might include things like names and addresses of clients, maybe telephone numbers and addresses of staff or volunteers for that organisation, names and personal details of people who donate money or their time, details of funding agreements, and information about strategic planning. So these need to be handled with care, and also under the Data Protection Act, you wouldn't be releasing these to absolutely anybody who asked for them. The next big thing that you need to know is about how personal and sensitive data can be kept safe and secure. So this is one of the large parts of the Data Protection Act. And ways to protect this information can include keeping the information backed up so that it's not just on one computer or in one filing system, and if something goes wrong and happens to that, you've lost all of the data. Also, you need to make sure that only authorised people have access to this information. So it shouldn't just be given out to everybody in the organisation, and it definitely shouldn't be given out to members of the public. You also need to know that you're making sure that data is shared within the inside of the organisation in need-to-know situations. So especially things like the sensitive data, it's important that these aren't just included on a form with the basic personal information, that these are handled more sensitively and more carefully. Also, data shouldn't be just left open or on show. So having printed files sitting on a table where anyone could walk past and pick them up and have a look, or having a computer screen that's facing out towards your customers where they can see the data that you're working with or the information that you're working with that might be personal or sensitive in some way. Also, data shouldn't be given away to other people, and this includes things like passing on contact details without permission. And there's many reasons why this is important not to do, and those, might include people's personal safety and their well-being. Sometimes also these confidentiality breaches happen by accident, so you need to know how to prevent that. Be careful that you're taking steps to prevent allowing your conversations to be overheard. So people walking through the back of the office and overhearing sensitive or personal data being given about someone. Also be careful not to allow intruders to enter a building. So people might be forcing their way in or might just be coming to areas of the building that they shouldn't have access to. You need to prevent people from gaining access to things like offices or computers or computer accounts that hold personal data and files and information. And don't leave your USB sticks or files or laptops or phones open to other people. And this includes the situation of shoulder surfing, where somebody is just glancing over your shoulder when you're working on something, maybe on a laptop or on your phone in a public place. Don't share your passwords and account details, or the passwords and account details of other people. That's kind of a given. And look out for social engineering. So this is things to do with people trying to trick your confidence or manipulate you, or maybe even impersonating co-workers or authorities to try and get information from you. So when you speak to somebody face to face or over the phone, be sure that you're finding ways to test their true identity and their authenticity in that situation. Now we're going to move on to the Freedom of Information Act, and it's got a slightly different focus. Its focus is on people being able to request information, so any individual being able to request information held by a public body. So this includes things like medical, school and police reports, information from publicly owned companies, also publicly funded museums, government departments and local councils. And this doesn't just cover official documents, but also things like drafts, emails, handwritten notes, recordings of telephone conversation, and things like CCTV footage. So it's really important to be acting professionally at all times. So even if you're jotting off a quick email to somebody, make sure that you're acting professionally in that environment, because you might find yourself that this information is being requested from you and made public to another individual that you didn't expect. Also, people can ask questions about decision-making processes, about who was a supplier or a contractor to a particular organisation. It's probably important as well to understand what the purpose of this Freedom of Information Act is. So it applies to public bodies, and public authorities spend money that's collected from taxpayers, and they make decisions that can significantly affect many people's lives. So the Freedom of Information Act acts as a way to allow the public to make public authorities accountable for their actions. And it allows a better informed and more productive public debate. People can have factual information about what is going on with different public organisations.